Hello and welcome to Tired Iron. This is my friend Ian's YZF600R. I believe it's a 2000 model. Today I'm going to be doing a valve adjustment. As you can see, I've removed the side plastics, the insert panels. The carburetors are just pulled back, they're not actually removed. I've removed the cooling fan and some of the bolts off of the valve cover. I'm just about ready to get started doing the valve adjustment. I also had to loosen the radiator and move it forward, take the tank and the seat off obviously. So, alright, let me mount this up here. Lower down a little bit. Looks good. I'm removing the last of the valve cover bolts. They have a rubber seal underneath the bolt, and when you're removing these, a lot of times the rubber will bond itself to the valve cover, and you have to get the rubber to break loose from this hole so that it will come out easily. Otherwise you can turn the bolt forever and still won't get it out. Sometimes they don't come loose very easy, is why I'm saying this. And you have to use a ratchet, spin the bolt up. Okay. This one the rubber came up on. Some of them, if the rubber won't come up, you can loosen the bolt halfway or so, take a flat blade screwdriver and just pry up the edge of the rubber a little bit, and they'll generally come up and come loose. Looks like on this, you just keep spinning them and they pull the rubber out itself, so good deal. Route these cables up through the air tube hole here. That will keep them out of the way, hopefully. Got all the bolts removed. Going to get my flat blade screwdriver in case I need it. It's not coming with this. And very gently try to pry it up. There is a half moon rubber piece here that's connected to the valve cover gasket. This bike has never been taken apart before, so it's bonded pretty well. The gasket's not going to come off real easy. I don't have another one, so I'm going to need to reuse this one. So I want to be real careful when I am separating the valve cover from this gasket to try and get it to come loose. Now I think there's a ridge on this gasket, and the ridge goes up into the valve cover. So the flat side of this rubber is on the bottom. So I'm going to want to pry these moons out of here, half moons, without poking a hole in them, and get the rubber to come loose and then get the valve cover to come off. If your bike's been taken apart a few times and had service done, then that may come off a little easier. However, this bike has 33,000 miles and I can tell has never been apart, at least not in the engine that I can see any evidence of. So I'm going to get the valve cover off and I'll be back. Alright, I'm back, and voila, I've got the valve cover off. The gasket stayed on all the way around. What I ended up doing was prying real gently right at each corner against the aluminum and the aluminum of this, and the gasket came up with it. And then I just made sure it didn't stick down anywhere. Good deal. Although it was very difficult to get out of here. These carbs had to be pulled back way to the side and it barely fit. So this does not come out of here very easily. But it does. Moving on. What have I forgotten? That's a good question to always ask yourself as you're working. What did I forget? I ask myself that constantly. I did forget to take this cover off to turn over the motor. I believe it's this cover. And I don't think that there's oil underneath this cover either. So, with any luck, when I be back, I'll have that off. There won't be oil on the floor, and we'll move on. I don't think it does. But you never know. At least you never know when you don't have the manual. Yeah, this is the stator cover, so we have some wiring here. I want to feed out. Yes. That seemed to help a little. Come on. The beauty of bikes that have never been worked on before. Hey, there is ours, I believe that's the stator coil. This is the pickup coil. This sends a pulse to the ignition coils to spark the plugs. This charges the battery, in case you ever wondered. It's alright. Moving on. If I only had a big crescent wrench. Oh. There is no oil under there. Also, it's a dry system. Some bikes have oil, some bikes don't in that area. I kind of like it when they don't. Okay, we're back again. As I was saying, I don't have the manual. Some cylinders are numbered 1 through 4 from left to right. Some of them are 1 through 4 from right to left. I always count that I generally refer to the one on the left as number 1. But let me tell you why it's not terribly critical. Number 1 and number 4 cylinders are directly at 180 opposite of each other. When number 1 is in its firing position and the spark plug sparks, number 4 is in its exhaust position and it's blowing out exhaust. So when the coil sparks, it sparks both of them at the same time. So it doesn't matter that it sparks in the exhaust, it doesn't cause a problem. This one on number 1 will spark and fire the cylinder, and then 180 degrees as the crank rotates around again, it gets the trigger, and that one's on its firing position. So you can look at a camshaft and see the lobes on the cam, and just follow them, and you can determine top dead center by the lobes on the cam. You just need to be able to turn the engine over. Let me see here. So I'm going to call this one number 1. Let's see here. This head is set up so that we can just watch the lobes turn. They push down against the valve shims. So as I turn the motor over, what we'll see is the camshaft start to turn. You'll be able to see the lobes coming up there on the front cam, indicating the exhaust valve is just closing and it's getting ready to go on to the intake stroke. This is the intake cam. You'll see the lobes come back around this way and move forward, and the piston inside will be coming up on its compression stroke. And we know that because the cam lobes will be pointed, let's see, away from each other at top dead center, indicating that both valves, sets of valves, are closed. So you can see these coming up right here. Bring it up till they're pointing straight toward this flush edge. A little farther. And just balance between the front and the rear, the exhaust and the intake cams. Both of the lobes are pointed up, indicating all the valves are closed. That's the position you want to be in. Also, on a Yamaha YZF600R, let's be professional, eh? This is the magneto. There is a mark right there. There's a green and a yellow. I don't know if that's, you can pick up the color. One of these is a timing mark and one is a top dead center mark. I'm going to say the yellow one's top dead center mark because it's close. It lines up with the split in the crankcase right here. If you look, the bottom piece and the top piece connect. There's a split right there. If you want to be exactly on top dead center, now that you're close, rotate this up and eyeball it till it's right on the spot. Yeah, it's pretty close. It was almost there. Okay, back to what we're doing. Valve feeler gauges. I'll be back with feeler gauges. Okay, we're back. Let me zoom in a little here. See what's going on. We're ready to check the valve lash on the first cylinder. Now, I don't have the manual on this book, and sometimes I find bikes that come into my shop that manuals, you can't even find one, or it's terribly expensive, and this is a critical adjustment. However, that being said, here are my feeler gauges. You'll notice here I have a .005 and a .004 American. That is a .12, this says 127, I call it a .12 and a .10 in metric. Those two sizes right there will work for a valve adjustment on almost any motorcycle out there. If you're unsure and you trying to get it going, you need to get it going, you don't have the money to buy the manual, you can't find it online for some reason, although normally you can. If you just don't know what the setting should be on any particular motorcycle, 10.10, I call it 10 intake, and 12.12 millimeters exhaust will work on almost anything. Okay, now let's see if we have a 12 on our exhaust. We slide this in between the lobe of the cam, actually the lobe's on the other side, but the round part of the cam, and then below it there is a bucket. They call it a bucket because it's shaped like a bucket, and it's upside down though, and it covers the valve. Underneath that bucket is where the shim is. On this type of engine, in order to change the shims, we have to remove the cam chain tensioner, which is going to make me take these carbs the rest of the way off anyway, so I guess we should have done that. And these journals, cam cap journals, will need to be removed in order to remove the cam to take out the bucket and change the shim. So on this type of engine, what you do is get a pad and paper, have it on hand, like so, and we write on it. This is what I do. I make 16 circles. Go. And this is left, and this is right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure the circles are big enough to write in. If you only had 8 valves per an 8-valve engine, you would have 8 circles. This is a 16-valve engine, so I have to have 16 of them. Where am I at? 15 and 16. Okay. And here's the center where the cam chain is. Correct? Correct. Okay. And just for reference purposes, I always put an EX up here for the exhaust side and an IN back here for the intake side, so that this is left, this is right, this is exhaust, this is intake. I theoretically can't get them confused. I say theoretically because it seems simple enough. You wouldn't get these confused, but it is very easy to get them confused when you're doing it for the first time, especially. I still get confused sometimes, which is why I still do that. It's the only way to have it all down for sure anyway. I mean, you'd have to do that. So, okay. Well, let's see what we got. Let's see if we have a 12 on our exhaust. We slip this in between the cam shaft and the top of the bucket, and that's where the lash is. Hey, it's clear, and this one's good too. All right, we don't have to do anything with these two, although they were a little loose. But loose is better than too tight. Loose meaning this fits easily in between there. If it was too loose, it would tick. You would hear a loud ticking when the bike was running. This bike didn't make any ticking, and it's at least this 12.12 millimeters of gap between the bucket and the cam. So, what was I saying again? Oh, moving on. This valve is okay. It does not need adjusted. So that's a little less work. Now we check the intake, which was supposed to be the 0.10. The thing with valve lashes too is they're a range. As long as it's within that range, it's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly 0.10. However, when you're adjusting multiple valve engines, like 4 valves per cylinder, you want to have it as exact as you can. What I mean is you could have a larger, a little larger, a little smaller, but as long as you have, well, at least this much gap. If you have less gap than this, than a 10, if you can't fit the 10 in there, then you try a smaller one. And if you can't fit that in, then the shim needs to be changed. Okay, you probably won't really see this, but that cylinder's good. Which makes sense because this one had 170 pounds of compression on it, which is great compression for the mileage. But this was an 80, and this one was a 90 or 80 as well. So I need to turn the engine over. What I do is one cylinder at a time. Some people check other lash settings while they're at it. It just, for the 10 seconds it takes, it's a lot easier to think of one piston at a time and do it this way. I did the first piston, I'm going to the next one. I turn the engine over till I see the cam lobes. And they're pointing up and back. The exhaust cam's lobes are pointing up and forward. I put my fingers on both of them on a small motor like this until I can feel that they're pointed exactly opposite of each other, telling me that the valves are closed, or should be closed. I still have my tin here, but let's see. Fits good there. Fits good there. Okay, that is somewhat troubling, if only for that this valve appears to be good also, but I had an exceptionally low reading for compression on that cylinder. which could indicate some other type of problem than a valve adjustment, possibly the valve seal, which is how well the valve seals to the inside of the head. If it's not sealing 100% airtight, then it will leak compression. Hello, kitty. This is my cat, Buttercup. Say hi, Buttercup. She has big paws. So I'm going to pause for now, speaking of pause, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Where were we? Oh yeah. We found that it didn't need a valve adjustment on one of the cylinders that had low compression. And unfortunately, Ian, that is not a good sign. However, moving along. We got our 10, that's 0.102 millimeter or 0.10 millimeter. Moving to the next cylinder. What I see here is that number 4 lobes are coming up into the proper position, pointing up and away from each other. So we'll stop right there. Check this cylinder. I don't expect this one to be bad either, only because it had good compression too. Looks good. Apparently I won't be doing a valve adjustment today. I will just have been showing you the procedure with which you check the valves on your YZF600R. All the valves are good. So what this tells us is that this bike possibly has poor valve seal, or it could just be ring wear, in which case the clock is ticking on how many miles are left. Until next time, this is Ron from Tired Iron. Ride safe.